There's Joyce.
So this is the Desert Dolphins Photo Committee Seminar featuring Phil Bonds. And Phil is going to be conducting this and should have you should have access to share your screen. Joining us is Leslie Nichols, myself, David Hale, Phil Bonds, Charlie Nichols, Maurice Lawson, Jack Douglas, Nancy Nestor, Bill Bauman, Joyce Sue, Vance Tanner, and Paul E.
Paul, pronounce your last name for me.
S-O-T-A. Paul, S-O-T-A.
S-O-T-A.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
And I
Phil?
still don't have a camera, so that's my old Norton 750 that I have up there.
Okay.
Phil, go ahead and take it and see if you can share your screen whenever you want.
Okay, I'm going to click on share your screen. You may have to talk me through this because I haven't done one of these Zoomers for a while. So as far as presenter goes, so
I've given everybody permission one at a time to share screen. So you should just be able down at the bottom.
okay, I've got to get to my desktop. Where is my desktop here? Grab the top here and see if I can.
Okay, for some reason you've got Nancy and Bill on your shared there, Phil. See
Oh,
if
get rid of that.
Nope, you did. Go ahead and maximize your screen. Let's see what that does.
Hit your slideshow.
Yeah, I'm going to go here.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Now
now
you guys up on the side there. Okay, let's see if I can. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that, put you guys at the top, but now I lost my screen here. Okay, there we are. Okay, is that up ready for everybody?
Sure.
Okay. So a couple of slides here just to kind of get warmed up and get things going. You guys can read, so I'm not going to read all these to you tonight. So we'll lock and load and get going. I always like to start out when I'm talking about camera equipment stuff with just a little bit of brief history, and you guys can read along with this as I toss in some extra information about each of the slides. But a lot of us, I know I didn't realize this, so a lot of underwater photographers didn't really know that Nikon, under its parent company, back in the 1950s, 56 tried to produce an underwater housing for one of their S2 rangefinder cameras. And they didn't really do much with that. And really the big boom with underwater camera stuff started when Jacques Cousteau and his partner in the company that would become Aqualung developed a little camera called a Calypso. And they invented that camera in 1961. That eventually became what became known as the Nikon S1. And you can look at this slide and it kind of gives you some dates that go with the development of the camera line. Cousteau and his partner realized that they weren't really geared up to produce cameras with their company in France. And so after piddling around with it for a little bit and producing a few cameras, ultimately they hooked up with Nikon's parent company and started allowing Nikon to produce under license the Nikonos line of cameras. So from 1961 1963 up through 1996, Nikon produced a bunch of pretty good underwater cameras. Some are better than others. You know, Nikonos numbered cameras were very, very, very compact. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because when we start talking about camera equipment that's out there today to use underwater, we're seeing some real major moves towards companies producing equipment that is really small compared to the bigger systems that some of us choose to use. So these are fairly compact systems that you can use. The one camera that's a little bit different there, the Nikonos RS system, was actually a full-featured Nikon DSLR designed for underwater use. So most of these cameras were what we call scale focus cameras. When you'd look through the viewfinder, you wouldn't see anything that would give you any kind of a focus indication. You literally had to look at the top of the lens and set the lens for the distance to your subject. Here's a slide of Nikonos cameras that I have in my collection. All of these work, by the way, and I've actually used some of these old film cameras to take pictures underwater. My favorite cameras are the one that's down in the lower, as you're facing your screen, the lower left-hand corner is a Nikonos 2. One of the old Nikonos experts that I used to work with a little bit referred to this as the DC3 of underwater Nikonos cameras. Incredible little camera, nothing electronic on it. It's fully mechanical. If you flooded it, you'd simply take it apart, pop the insides out of the casing, pop the lens off, rinse everything off under water, and then you would, under fresh water, and then you dry it off or let it dry, and then replace usually the top O-ring on it, and then stick it back together and make it work. That same camera body is up on the very top. You see a camera up there that's mounted on a tray with some handles with balls on the ends. And there's a couple of underwater light meters under that. One of those light meters is actually hooked to the base of that little system that I have that camera mounted on. These cameras didn't have a mounting screw on the bottom of them. And so to mount them on a tray with handles, you have to get kind of creative. The one that's in the center that is attached to those 105 strobes and that very large tray handle system, that's a Nikonos 5. And over on the side, there's a Nikonos 3. All those cameras, like I say, they all still work. The strobes still work. And I use them from time to time. But really, to use those cameras effectively, you have to use an underwater light meter. So a lot of cool stuff with that. But Nikonos, when they went to their RS system, it was really a great idea for an underwater camera system. The downside was that it was very expensive. And unfortunately, the early models were prone to flooding. The O-rings on that camera system were very, very sensitive. And they improved that as time passed, as the model was in production. And you can read through all the different things that this camera had built into it as an underwater film camera. And, you know, they improved it. So later models weren't as prone to flooding as the early models were. And they, you know, through the course of time, Nikonos did convert some of these RS systems to digital use so the US Navy could use them for espionage stuff. I've never seen one of those cameras on the market that's been converted. Nikon did produce a Howell's digital point and shoot or compact camera that they called the Nikon 1. What they found, though, is that by the time they introduced that, there were so many other companies making underwater cameras and Howell's systems and stuff that it just wasn't profitable enough for them to continue manufacturing it. A couple of years ago, I had a friend who was actually looking for a Nikonos 1 to go down and do some swimming with whales in Australia. And I helped him locate one that worked really well for him, but not a hugely successful camera. But that's a little bit of the history of, you know, some cameras, and a lot of us folks on here who would probably be categorized as old timers. You know, we recognize these cameras typically when we see them. It's like, oh yeah, there's the Nikonos there, some kind of an early underwater camera. Let me just make a really quick, does somebody have a comment?
Yeah, Phil, it's Jack. I just wanted to mention the way you've configured the slides, it's not a slide, you're showing the next slide also. I don't know whether you wanted to leave it that way. I think
Oh.
it's just, you select F5
Let me try it, see.
because you're showing the next slide on this
Let
and
me
your
see
notes.
my display settings.
If you're using PowerPoint, it's F5, I believe.
Okay, so I'm just pushing F5 key,
I
or I'm
think,
hitting select F5.
although you're on Zoom, so I'm not sure. Well, no, I mean, it should be on your slide deck. If you're using PowerPoint, it should be F5. Or there's some icons below the where it says a quick comment. Maybe it's one of those icons there too. Or maybe if somebody else knows how to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. We may just have to settle
You see,
for as is
Do you
with
see
it.
the screen to your left of your arrow there, the screen icon?
Here?
Right, it might be that. Nope.
Go to the one to the right. See also,
More? What am I doing wrong here?
Screen.
I would hit
No.
hide presenter view.
Well,
It's
the
the-
problem if I hide presenter view is my notes go away.
Okay.
So let's just roll with it as it is, and
All right.
we'll sort this thing out later. Anyway, you guys can see how accurately I follow things. So anyway, as we jump into the presentation here, my whole motive here with doing particularly the type of underwater photography I really enjoy watching people engage themselves in photography. And cameras are creative tools. I don't really care much about what kind of camera people use, as long as they're getting out actually using a camera to take pictures and stuff. So the purpose here, my purpose is to try to help people kind of understand and know how their cameras work and how they can configure cameras to make them that work better to get good images. So a little bit of a disclaimer. Yeah, I use one of these great big huge camera systems, but I have a lot of respect for anybody else who's taking a camera underwater, regardless of whether it's a small point and shoot type compact or whatever it is. So anyway, we'll just move right along here. One of the issues I've got with this, and I'll apologize, is that normally I would do these on my Mac, and I'm much more familiar with the Mac system. Unfortunately, the operating system on my Mac is so old that I can no longer do email stuff on it. And I have to keep it old because if I upgrade it, I'll lose the ability to use some software that I use to photo process there. So anyway, let's take a look real quick at categories of underwater cameras. And you can read this. So much for the brief history and me talking about my perspective. Let's really look at what we're doing here tonight. And what we're doing is the camera systems that we're using. You've got housed DSLRs, mirrorless, and I included the 4/3 variety of cameras in there that are made by Olympus and Panasonic, because those cameras share a lot of characteristics with DSLRs and mirrorless cameras that are housed. We've got the house smartphones that people are using now, and I don't believe there's one particular brand of smartphone that's better than another, but the housings for those are actually kind of cool, and people are producing some really good stuff with those. Compact cameras, and typically these cameras are housed as well. And we have the sport camera variety that are usually housed. Again, all the cameras in these categories produce really, really good images. And the cameras are simply, tools that we're using to actually do stuff. Looking at the smartphone variety, one of the things that, from what I understand, you have to have on your smartphone to make it work with the housing is an app. And most of the housing manufacturers are actually putting out apps that allow you to use that smartphone in a housing and use like a push button type of control system, real similar probably to what we're using with these housed DSLRs. So a lot of good choices out there that are growing in popularity. The TG system of Nikon, or excuse me, of Olympus's that are out there, very, very, very popular, along with the Sea Lifes. Seeing some incredibly good images, and I'll share some really good images with you that are taken with the Olympus TG series tonight, as well as with the Sea Life. Sport cameras include GoPros and what I refer to as GoPro wannabes, because there are cameras out there that function basically the same as the GoPro line does. Feature photographers. Some of you folks in the presentation tonight have your name on the list. Leslie uses an Olympus TG6. Heidi, I don't think she's here tonight on the presentation, but she uses a TG7. Nancy Nestor, smartphone photographer. Michaela Miller, who works down at the dive shop, helped us out by letting me use some of her pictures that she's done with her Sea Life Micro 3.0 compact camera. You'll also see some pictures of equipment in the presentation that were done by Ken Kolowitz, who owns Ultralight Control Systems out in the Ventura, California area. Actually, I think his company is in Oxnard, but Ken's been a good friend, and his company makes really, really super good products, to make these cameras easier to use. And he was my go-to person to try to get pictures to show some of this equipment off that we're going to feature tonight. And then you've got me. I use a Nikon D850 DSLR system. So lots of different cameras we'll look at tonight real quickly. So before we jump into looking at specific cameras, let's talk a little bit about digital sensors. How does, a digital sensor work? Does the size actually matter? Well, I always when people ask me that, I like to tell them, well, it kind of depends on a lot of things. What are you planning on doing with your images? If you're planning on enlarging your images, really large, for display or for sale, a small sensor camera is probably not going to get you what you need there. But if you're looking at doing stuff on a smaller scale, focus on smaller enlargements, maybe selling smaller pictures, doing stuff on social media, a small camera sensor works just fine on those. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about how camera sensors work, and hopefully this will help explain why your camera sensor size matters and help you understand the capabilities of whatever camera system that you're using. And I'm one of those people, you can see in my notes here, that I firmly believe understanding how your camera system works, or how your camera works, is going to make you a better photographer. So you can tap into some of this stuff. So let's talk specifically about sensors. Camera sensors contain millions of light capturing cavities called photosites. The light captured by these photosites is transformed into what we call pixels, and images are composed of pixels. Pixels are the smallest unit of a digital image that can be displayed on a device. Most manufacturers of digital cameras like to tout the megapixel count of their cameras. 1 million pixels equals 1 megapixel. There's an error on there. 1 megapixel is 1 million megapixels is 1 million megapixels. So if you've got a 26 megapixel sensor, you've got 26 million photosites on the sensor, and higher megapixel counts can equal a quality image, a better quality image, but not necessarily. Size of your sensor comes into play. High megapixel counts on a small camera sensor means the photosites are smaller, so that they'll work for you. Let's take a real quick look, and if you've got a pencil or something to write on real handy, you may want to write down what size your camera sensor is for future reference as we go through some stuff here. And you can see the list here runs full sensor cropped 4/3, Olympus TG7, Olympus TG6, Sea Life Micro 3.0, smartphone, I use the Apple sensor size for smartphones. Their stuff's been pretty standard, although I've heard that some of their brand new iPhones have a little bigger sensor in them. And then you've got a sensor size there for a sport camera like a GoPro listed as well. So it's not an exhaustive list of cameras people are using to do underwater photography, but it covers the common cameras I see on dive boats. And if you're one of those people like me, and I know like Dave, both of us have camera systems that we use that have crop sensors on them. My D7200 system is a crop sensor camera. There's a range of sizes there. And the reason there's a range is because some manufacturers' crop sensors aren't as large as others. For example, Canon crop sensors are a tad smaller than the ones Nikon uses. So anyway, just a real quick list. And if you want to visualize what some of these sizes look like, take a look at this slide. This should give you a pretty good idea of kind of where your sensor is on the list, but this one will probably give you a little better picture, a little easier to visualize with this one. So if you look at the sizes that are here, you've got, full frame down to teeny tiny with 1 and 3.2 inches or 4.54 by 3.42 millimeters. That's a pretty tiny sensor, particularly compared with a full frame sensor like my Nikon D850 has on it. So you might look at that and say, okay, I'm not exactly sure where's my sensor fit. Well, there are some in-between sizes with these when you look at the measurements. So, quite a step down from going to full frame, clear down there to the bottom. So bigger, better. Well, I don't, the easy answer here is no, bigger isn't always better. Larger systems require larger lenses to cast images on sensors. Larger images require bigger camera bodies. Larger camera bodies, whoops. Computer kind of freaked out there. Anyway, larger camera bodies require larger underwater housings. The reality here is that larger DSLR mirrorless underwater camera systems are pretty cumbersome and pretty expensive. And I know I'm kind of talking to the choir here on some of this stuff because some of you folks have used these larger systems and you've either sold them or you've got them stored someplace and you kind of switched over to using a smaller system because you felt like, hey, you just didn't want to pack all this big heavy stuff around anymore. The big question is, you really need to think about what you're doing with your images. Do you really need a large camera system or will a smaller one do for you? And I know some of you folks have actually moved to the smaller variety. Just a real quick slide that kind of talks about that whole large sensor versus small sensor stuff again. And then moving on quickly, this is part of the system that I pack whenever I pack up to go on a dive trip. And some of you are probably looking at that slide thinking, been there, done that. Don't want to go back and do that again. When I pack this system, if I'm going to fly, I actually have a roller bag that most of this system will fit into so I can put it in the overhead storage on the airplane. Now, the bag will not fit everything. Usually there's a few items I have to shift over and put in my checked luggage. And that would include things like my dome port would go into the bag with my check bag, I should say, the snoot that's sitting there just in the lower left-hand corner of the table there. That snoot goes into my check bag. I make sure that I've got everything I need in the roll-on bag to engage in underwater photography when I get to a place to actually start shooting pictures. But the entire system won't fit in the bag. So the reason I take enough minimally just to be able to do what I need to do is because I'm always living in fear that my check bags won't make it to the destination I'm going to. And I figure I can always rent dive gear if I need to when I get someplace. But it would be really hard to find somebody who'd be willing to loan me a dome port for a camera system like this. So, you know, I'm pretty careful. I always make sure I've got everything I need to engage in doing the underwater photography stuff. And for what it's worth, I always pack my prescription dive mask in my, I'll either carry it on my person or I stick it in my under the seat bag or something like that. Because frankly, I'm as blind as a bat. I can't see anything without a prescription mask underwater, and I have to have that thing in order to function. So moving along, some advantages, the smaller sensor types of cameras, they are much more compact. The housings tend to weigh a whole lot less than those big DSLR housings do. They don't do hugely worse in low light, but there are some ways to deal with performance issues related to light. We'll talk about those in a few minutes. Smaller sensors also tend to provide less depth of field or less field of view and less depth of field. And then you have to ask yourself that question that you see there in my notes. You know, how much do you need for what you're doing? And a smaller sensor camera may give you what you need without worrying about packing a big system. Personally, I think they give me less creative control over the images that I'm trying to produce, but you can produce great images with these things without having total control over everything that's happening with the camera anyway. So one of the things I just add here, and again, you can probably see it in my notes, it's important to learn how to work with your camera to get the kinds of images that you want. Anyway, let's take a peek here at Bill Bauman's system that he uses. Take a look at this sucker. This is a system that he uses. It's a Sea Life system. It's basic underwater housing for a smartphone. It's smaller than the housing of my DSLR. I really think if I wanted to try it, I could probably put all of Bill's system here inside my Nauticam housing and probably have a little bit of room left over. Might have a problem with those handles, getting those in that are attached to the tray, but you know, you look at this and you might think, wow, you know, you can actually do underwater photography with this and good underwater photography with it. The answer there, you know, yep, you sure can. Here's another system. Oceanic makes these. Several companies actually make them. Another basic housing. One of the cool things about these housings for smartphones is that they don't just work with a specific brand. It doesn't matter if you're using an Apple product or one of the other types of products, you're still going to probably get some pretty good images, you know, using whatever iPhone it is you choose, or excuse me, whatever smartphone you want to choose. I use Apple, so whenever I think smartphone, my brain always goes to iPhone. Now, here's a difference. You take a look at this photo here. This is the largest photo I've ever sold. There's a couple in Southern California that have this image hanging in their house. It is an image that was captured with a 12 megapixel camera. That image hanging on their wall in that house is 40 by 50 inches in size. Doesn't include the matting or the frame and all that kind of stuff that's on it, but the image is 40 by 50. And when they asked me if I could do the picture this big, I wasn't sure that I could do that because the Nikon D300 I captured this image with only has a 12 megapixel sensor. So you look at it and say, wow, you know, you got an image 40 by 50 out of a 12 megapixel sensor. The answer is, yeah, I did. We did some proof runs with this. Proofs are when you have the printer make some strips of the image, just kind of check the resolution on it. And we realized that we could go 40 by 50 with this without running into any huge major problems. So you look at that and say, well, how in the world, my iPhone has a better, has a larger megapixel sensor than that thing has. How can you do that with a 12 megapixel camera? Well, the answer is pretty simple. The sensor on that Nikon D300, that 12 megapixel camera, has very large photo sites on it. And the other thing, when I combine that with being really close to that whale, not quite standing on top of it, but close, the closer you are, the better resolution you're going to get a lot of times. So I got lucky with this one, and this one actually worked out pretty well. And it's been an image that I've actually been able to sell fairly frequently and make a little bit of money on here and there. Some cool add-on gear, and some of you guys are using some of this add-on gear on your systems already. Wet wide-angle lenses and wet diopter lenses. These are really cool accessories that you can get for camera systems nowadays. Basically change these underwater without having to open the camera housing and swapping lenses here and there. Mounting systems for these diopters and wide-angle lenses, these wet lenses, actually vary a little bit. But let's take a real quick look at the whole diopter thing, because it's really, really good for doing macro photography. The one I use with my D850 is a 7.5 magnification diopter lens, and I use that with my 60 millimeter, 105 millimeter macro lenses. So what diopters do for you? They give you a higher magnification. They are very, very available for, of course, the DSLR mirrorless 4/3 crowd. Some compacts allow you to use them with your compact camera. Smartphones, depends on your housing choice, but most of the smartphone housing manufacturers have some type of a system where you can actually add these things to your camera system. Here's a diopter that I use on my DSLR system. You basically take all of these parts, assemble them, and you plug them onto the front port of the camera. It's again, the one I use here, you can see the lens is actually in the lower left-hand corner there. It's a 7.5 magnification lens. And it's basically a close-up lens. If some of you guys have been involved in photography for a long, long time, you probably know that close-up lenses have been around for a long, long time. I've got a set with my photo gear in my equipment room here that was manufactured in the early 1960s. So these things have been around for land photography for a long time. So kind of a cool thing to be able to add to your system. And again, widely available for multiple types of systems. Here's how it looks with my system. I flipped that up out of the way. There are some mounting rings which will allow me to use two different magnification diopterates, but I seem to do fine with a 7.5 one. Here's what it looks like actually flipped down in place. And here's what it's good for. You look at this picture, I did this picture on the last trip to San Carlos I made with Leslie in June. This is a hermit crab. The shell that this hermit crab was in is only about 1/4 inch long. And I use this, of course, with my Nikon D850, and I use the 60 millimeter Nikon micro lens with that 7.5 diopter in a flip mount to capture it. And you can look at it. I mean, it's a pretty reasonably good picture of the hermit crab with his little legs and I think his eyeballs sticking out there. He was out at Deer Island in San Carlos. So let's take a look. Here's a smartphone housing setup for a diopter. This one, instead of using a flip type system, it uses a pivoting type system, my 7.5 diopter lens would fit right in that bracket, right over that where the lens opening is on that housing. So all you'd have to do is just move it in place to get on your target there. And it's a, you know, I think it's a pretty cool system that they've made available to really allow people to engage in macro photography and even you know, super macro photography. So this set stuff's done. Let's just jump into looking at some images that were captured with an Olympus TG6. And you can read through all of the characteristics or specifications of the TG6. I didn't list all of them on this slide, but there's quite a bit of stuff you can do with this little compact camera. I mean, it truly is very, very, very compact. I love this picture of this fireworm munching on some coral that Leslie got in Bonaire. That's a truly incredible photo. And if you look, I mean, look at the detail that camera picked up on that fireworm. So really, really, really cool picture. Again, we're using that TG6 to shoot some pictures of some pretty small stuff here. Next up are some images captured with a Sea Life 3.0 micro camera. And again, you can look through those characteristics there. I did not list them all, but it's got some really, really good characteristics that make that a good camera to use underwater. This is a type of camera, a lot of dive shops handle these things. You know, the gal that let me use the pictures here, works at the dive shop there in Tucson, and you know, they've got a pretty good line of these things available for people that are interested in getting into underwater photography. Let's take a look at her pictures real fast. It's a nice pic of a sea turtle there. Got a little octopus action going on. You know, what would an underwater photography session be if you didn't manage to capture an image of a green moray or a little small fish, maybe a little larger fish. Another large one there. And as you look at these, I didn't do any adjustments on any of these photos that people let me use for the presentation. I didn't do any adjustments in terms of post-processing them. These are all the images that they submitted in the form that they submitted them in. So I think pretty good colors on that one. Look at a TG7 Olympus compact. Again, you can kind of cruise through the characteristics. You don't see a lot of difference between the TG6 and the TG7. The differences are pretty minimal. Both cameras do a pretty good job of working underwater. Little nudibranch there. Another one here. Some type of a snail there with some interesting coloration on a foot. Or frogfish. Of course, Heidi's been doing a lot of diving, you know, in Asia, where you get these clownfish, different species of clownfish that kind of hang out and do their thing. You know, she's got a pretty good collection of images that involve these clownfish and anemones. Another nudibranch. And you can get pretty good detail, pretty good depth of field. The parts of the nudie here aren't horribly out of focus. This one's probably a little better than this one is, but you know, some good stuff. And from what I understand, this particular fish was teeny tiny.
Yep.
Little blue ringed octopus action there. Cuttlefish. You look at those and say, wow, you know, TG6s and TG7s do pretty good. So let's take a look at some images captured with a smartphone. Okay, and again, I just listed the general specs on you know, some of these smartphones that you can use. Again, you have to have an app on your phone to allow the camera to work with the housing. That's not a bad thing. It actually gives you push button capability with those phones and those housings. So here we go. The next smartphone is actually, you know, I think it's a pretty good choice for people who are looking at not wanting to pack all this heavy, bulky equipment around. Smartphone camera images. This includes the GoPros and GoPro clones. One of the issues that I've heard people talk about with GoPro specifically is that, you know, particularly for dive shops that stock these things and sell them to people, it's hard to keep up with GoPro. These guys seem to be prolific at producing new models. They typically have produced 2 to 4 new models every year for these. Did somebody have a comment?
No.
No? Okay. Does have a, you know, fairly small, you know, the sensor on these is small, but you can do some pretty good stuff with them. So this is my old GoPro 9 system. I typically pack this with me when I go on dive trips, but a lot of times it ends up staying in the bag. I don't always mount it and use it, mostly because I get so into shooting still pictures that I forget to turn this thing on. But here's a picture of what you can do with a GoPro. This is a whale shark image from Hawaii. And I had to settle for pulling this image out of a video because I was videoing, and unfortunately when this whale shark showed up several miles offshore of the big island there in Hawaii, every dive boat that was within 5 miles dashed out there real quick to put divers in the water with it, or I should say put swimmers in the water with it. And I'll tell you what, the whale shark was literally surrounded by people wanting to swim with it on snorkel. So I did have a couple of moments where I captured a little bit of video of it, and you know, but if you look at it, the resolution is actually really good on this. The water clarity out there was excellent. You know, overall, you know, not a bad photo for pulling it out of a video. I've never tried clicking just still pictures with the GoPro, but they would probably be similar to this if I were to just click pictures of it. Whoops, I skipped over one. Let's see if this one will play. GoPros are used a lot for video stuff, and I included a couple of videos just in case we had some videographers who showed up for the presentation tonight. This one was actually kind of fun. This was a trip out to Guadalupe Island to dive with the big boys and girls out there. You can see my cage partner there is in, she's in GoPro on a stick mode. So there's actually a lot of pretty cool stuff you can do with the sport variety of cameras. DSLR mirrorless images, again, the 4/3 category of cameras are included in this. Again, you can cruise down through the list of specifications there, characteristics for camera systems like this, pros and cons. I will tell you that doing the maintenance on those housings is not a whole lot of fun, because usually if you send the housing in to have O-rings maintained on it, it sets you back some money. I think the last housing I sent in for service ended up costing me about $600 by the time the technician was done working on it. So just the cost of that is kind of one of those things a lot of people don't get real fired up about. Anyway, here's some images. So kind of cruise through the cameras and the categories. And, you know, if you think about it, what can we do to make, you know, some of these cameras easier to use, easier to hang on to, easier to point in the right direction, easier to add accessories to. The first thing I always recommend to people is, you know, if you got a point and shoot type of compact camera, or if you've got a smartphone in a housing, probably an accessory you want to add to that is a tray with handles. Here's a Sea Life Micro 3.0 mounted on a tray. And again, these are pretty darn popular. I've seen a lot of people just trying to handhold these underwater, and even though they're kind of designed to be ergonomic, I'm not sure I'd want to be trying to just hang on to one underwater or have a lanyard attached to it to keep it from getting separated with me. I always like to have something I can grab a hold of with my hands and have that firmly in place. iPhone housing with a tray and single handle on it. You notice on the bottom of the housing, there are actually 2 attachment points. A lot of these smartphone housings actually come with multiple attachment points on the bottom to keep the housing from pivoting when it's mounted on a tray. This one's that housing that has the pivot system for a wet lens that goes on it. Another system, a Sea Life system. This is a double handle tray setup on this one for using the sport variety camera like GoPro and GoPro wannabes. You know, here's a double handle tray to go with those. I might add that when I captured that image of the whale shark, when I was out shooting video of that critter in Hawaii, I didn't have a tray or handle for that thing yet. I hadn't figured out that I needed one yet. When I jumped off the boat into the water with that whale shark, I had that GoPro clasped in my hand. And of course, I'm swimming around trying to get pictures of the whale shark, shoot video of the whale shark and stuff. When I got back on the boat, the owner of the dive shop I was diving with was on the boat. Of course, I climbed back in with my GoPro. And the owner asked me, he said, "Hey, when you were swimming with the whale shark, did you see the bottom?" And I said, "You know, I was so focused on the whale shark, I didn't even look for the bottom." And the owner laughed. She started laughing and she said, "Well, it's not like you could have seen it anyway. You were diving over 5,000 feet of water there. The bottom was 5,000 feet below you." And I had the thought, I thought, my God, what would have happened to my camera if I dropped it? Obviously, if I dropped it, it would have just been gone. So, not a bad thing to have handles on there that you're hanging on to, and not a bad thing to have some type of device that you can use to clip your camera system to you when you're diving it. So I've looked at underwater images captured by different photographers using different camera systems. And all of the underwater images that I've shown you so far in this presentation, all of these images have something in common. And the really easy answer to that, if you're following along, you can see the next slide coming, is every underwater photographer featured in this presentation effectively used underwater lighting to improve the quality of their images. This is a collection of the strobes and arms and stuff that I have. Yeah, all this stuff works. All those old Nikon OS 105 strobes still work. I maintain them. I work with them every month to make sure that everything works the way they're supposed to. So if you look at that and say, wow, okay, so you got to figure out some way to add lights to this if you really want to be effective. Well, here you go. You can add a lot of lights to your system if you want to. And yeah, it looks a little silly, and it probably is, but you know, if I wanted to dive this system with all 6 of these lights and a focus light sitting on top of it like this, every one of these strobes would fire. All I have to do was turn the camera on, turn the strobes on, and hit the shutter switch on the housing, and every one of these would fire. So, you know, I've got it rigged so that I can actually fire multiple strobes if I needed to. But you know, I put this slide in here to kind of make a silly point that, yeah, underwater lighting is critical when we're trying to capture high quality underwater images. And you guys have all been through this, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here. When you become a scuba diver, one of the things in your basic underwater scuba diving course that they teach you is that, you know, the light tends to get absorbed when it penetrates water. So, you know, it's not a big deal if you're shallow, but the deeper you go, the more elements of the color spectrum start vanishing on you. The first color to disappear is red. So next question, you know, you ask, okay, strobes or video lights? Well, both will work for still images. We'd look at the photographers that allowed me to use some of their pictures in this presentation tonight. You know, you can see what they use. Leslie uses 1 strobe on hers. Heidi used 1 video light and a backscatter mini strobe. Nancy has 2 video lights on hers. Michaela Miller has 1 video light. I use 2 strobes. Now my strobes can actually double as video lights, and I've helped some people by switching to video light mode from time to time, where, you know, I switch them to video light just to light up a subject so they can capture the colors of the subject if they don't have lights on their camera. But you know, lighting does make a difference, and all of the people who let me use their images have figured that out. So let's, you know, we could spend a lot of time tonight talking about the science of underwater lighting, but that's probably for another presentation down the line. Bottom line here is that adding lights isn't difficult. It will improve your images as you learn how to use it. And usually if you're shooting stills, I would recommend strobes, but video lights will work just fine, especially if you're trying to get images of smaller stuff, or if you're getting really close to your subjects like you should be anyway. The other downside is that I'm sure they're working on solving this problem, but I have not seen any type of a smartphone or a housing for an iPhone that's designed to work with strobes yet. Now, I wouldn't be at all surprised if at some point we don't see somebody come up with a solution for this. But it's, you know, so I'm sure a solution isn't in the works, but so far we don't see it yet. Strobes are actually probably a little easier to use than, or excuse me, video lights are actually a little easier to use than strobes, because with a video light, you turn it on and you can actually see where the light's going. with strobes, you have to kind of figure out, okay, what's my light cone coming from the strobe look like? What angle do I need to have it at? All this kind of stuff. So video lights are actually easier to use than a strobe is when you're determining that strobe to subject angle that you've got to have. So let's look at some lighting setups that people have on these or that are available for some of these types of equipment. Most of these are very, very, very simple. You can use them with compact cameras, you can use them with smartphones, sport cameras, DSLR systems. And as we kind of zip through some of these, I'll just pitch this off the top. Most of these systems are very, very, very simple that you're going to see in the pictures. I prefer having 2 arms on each of my lights that I'm using, whether they're strobes or even the focus light that I have that also functions as a video light. I prefer having 2 because I want to be able to manipulate that light to put it where it needs to go for the image I'm trying to capture. So here's a double video light system, very simple one on a smartphone housing. Here's one for a Olympus TG system. That's 2 video lights. Here's a iPhone or smartphone system with 1 video light. GoPro or sport camera with 2 video lights on it. You can use that sport camera with just 1 video light if you want to. So here's one. They've got this one actually mounted on one of those poles that people like the selfie stick kinds of things. Another GoPro with a video light system on it. If I was just packing my GoPro, this is the system I would probably use. Notice the arms that I have. There's actually 2 arms. They're linked with a clamp, and I would mount, that light on the actual arms with the 2 arm setup on there to make it work right for me. Put the light where I want it to go. This is Bill's system. He assembled it for me. He popped the little red filter off of the front of this so you could see the lenses on the smartphone that he's using inside the housing. A lot of manufacturers are making filters that you can snap onto these housings that kind of help you with some of the color loss issues that you may have if you dive below, say, 10 feet, deep. You can actually snap filters off and on those things to compensate and color correct for you on your images. Here's a Sea Life with a video light system on it. Here's my D850 DSLR system sitting beside the way I configure the little GoPro system. If I'm just going to dive with the GoPro, you can see how that works. Now let's jump to what, we use a housing for. The housing is supposed to be designed to keep everything that you have dry inside there. This is what happens when you don't do that. You see the results here of 1 major flood in a housing and a minor flood. A minor flood that I managed to, pick up. Both of these, honestly, were catastrophic, and they happened within 6 months of each other. Needless to say, my insurance company was not real happy with me when I called to file the claim stuff to get these cameras and lenses replaced. The second time, they were pretty upset with me. They kept asking questions about who was responsible for this so we can sue them and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, it was me. So despite the fact that this, the camera on the right-hand side doesn't look significantly damaged, it still had enough water in it to kill it. the first major flood I had happened because I allowed myself to get distracted from working through my prepping routine. If you look at this slide, I give you a list of things I think you need to do to avoid flooding your equipment. Develop a routine for getting your system ready to get wet. Eliminate the distractions when prepping your system. Most of these housings and stuff I've kind of zoomed through tonight use some type of vacuum system to ensure the housing is sealed properly. And so you want to learn how to use that vacuum system correctly and make sure it's working properly before you take a plunge with your equipment. Then, of course, you need to develop a routine for rinsing and maintaining your housing after you're done diving. Don't allow yourself to get distracted. You know, a couple of years ago, and a few years ago, I should say, some of you guys probably remember we had a disaster at my house while I was actually down in Mexico working on a job that I was going to get paid for doing. We had a house flood, and I had to pull off of that job and come home to deal with the house flood and the fact that my wife ended up with a broken leg as a result of the flood. And what was really bad was I came home and I had my routine for rinsing and maintaining all my equipment, which looks a lot like filling up the bathtub and setting my stuff in it, letting it sit in there in warm water for about an hour before I pull it out and you know, take it apart, put it away. I got distracted. I went off and left that housing sitting in the bathtub while I was filling the bathtub up with water. And before I knew it, the bathtub overflowed, and the part of our house that wasn't flooded suddenly became flooded again. Needless to say, an insurance company wasn't real happy with having to pay out 2 claims because I allowed myself to get distracted. So very, very, very important. Don't let yourself get distracted. The other thing to figure out is how to clean and properly store your housing, your O-rings after you're done diving. So figure all that stuff out and make sure you got a routine developed so you just kind of follow it step by step and you probably won't have problems. Here's some pumps that I use with different vacuum systems that I've got for my larger housings. Basically 3 different types of housings that I have vacuum systems on. One thing I'd strongly recommend, never, ever, ever store your housing with the O-ring compressed in the housing. Either store your housing open and in a plastic bag or remove the O-rings. I store my clean lubricated O-rings in sealed Ziploc bags. I also store the housing in a way so they won't be collecting dust with the different types of lube and stuff I have to use. Know what kind of lube that your O-rings require. 4 different types of lube here. And yeah, I've got 4 different types of housings that I use. You see some Subal lube there in that little round container, some CNC lube, some Ikelite lube, and some Nauticam lube. Keep in mind that all lubes aren't created the same, and they're not made for all the same O-rings. Or I should say all your O-rings can't just use one type if you're using different brands of O-rings. Different manufacturers manufacture these O-rings in a different way. And if you use the wrong grease on your O-rings, it can cause your O-rings to swell up. And when they swell up, they don't fit like they're supposed to, and they lose their sealing ability. So some kind of important things to remember there in terms of maintaining your O-rings. Always make sure you've got the right kind of lube, and don't just guess and say, well, I'll just borrow some lubes from somebody because I forgot a tube or whatever. Make sure you're using the right stuff. I really hate to see people putting camera equipment in rinse buckets on dive boats. These things, in my opinion, and again, this is just an opinion, I think they're very, very hazardous to your photographic equipment. And I guess one of the reasons I say this is because I still remember paying out $600 to have a dome port repaired after a boat captain dropped a GoPro camera right in the middle of my dome port after sticking my camera in one of these rinse buckets on a dive boat. So What I would recommend doing is don't use the rinse bucket. Use a towel. You know, just wrap your gear up, wrap your camera in a towel, cover it with a towel, and you'll probably be just fine. Okay. Developing your camera skills. First thing, man, I can't stress this. The importance of this is incredible. You need to learn how your system works. I helped a gal a few years ago assemble a very expensive camera system, and she had never tried to fire a picture with a digital DSLR camera in her life. And, you know, it took her like almost 3 years to figure out how everything worked on the camera system. And I kept telling her, get out there, practice, 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 you know how your camera works. You know, I mentioned in the notes here, did I mention how important it is to practice? I can't emphasize this enough. You know, you can always look at and evaluate other photographers' work, evaluate the images you're producing, ask for help if you need it, but just get out there and practice. You don't need to go on dive trips all the time to practice with your camera. There are lots of opportunities to do other types of things. Somebody flipped through a few of these, and guys, we're almost done. I know it's 7, but we'll wrap it up here in a few minutes. You take a look at this picture. A lot of people ask me, you know, how in the world do you capture images of these sea lions when they're moving so fast underwater, and you've got that great big bulky camera system that you're trying to take pictures with? You know, how can you swing that underwater with all the bulk and keep up with those? Well, I practice. I like to go out to a skydiving center over here in Eloy between Tucson and Casa Grande. And I go out and practice, usually on Sunday afternoons when the skydiving season's going on. I'll go out and I'll practice clicking pictures of these guys coming in, making really super fast landings with their little tiny parachutes that they use nowadays. Fast moving airplanes are a great way to practice, you know, do images like this. You know, again, air shows, airports, all kinds of ways to find subjects for this kind of stuff. There's no shortage of places you can practice your macro skills that don't involve going underwater. This first image that you're seeing here was captured with a 105 millimeter Nikkor macro lens, shot out in that, I guess it's an area north of Oro Valley. I had to shoot up at this cactus because the cactus was so big and I'm so short. Standing on an 8-foot step ladder didn't get me on the area that I needed to be on to shoot these flowers. So, you know, straight on. So I tried to do some things that were kind of creative with that. This is from over by Picacho Peak, wildflower stuff. You want to practice macro. Insects and arachnids are always good subjects to play with this stuff with. This bee was on the bird bath in our backyard. I filled the bird bath full of water, and you can actually see the bee's reflection in the water there on the edge of the bird bath. My wife hates these pictures, but you know, we get these little teeny tiny spiders that like to kind of hang out in the yard, and sometimes I'll go out. I'll shoot this kind of stuff with a strobe. I'm always practicing, not just with the camera, but also with some type of speed light to add lighting, you know, to the picture to make it better. Because I use strobes underwater, and so I practice with a flash or a speed light. Hummingbirds, great subjects if you got a backyard and you've got a feeder or two hanging around. Again, this was captured with a speed light.
Speed light
is a flash.
yes, thank you.
Okay. This one, we've got a water feature in our backyard that looks like a cactus that's actually plumbed. It has water that spouts up, and the birds absolutely love to come in and splash around where the water comes out and stuff. And you can do some fun stuff, you know, just again, practice with your camera. Practice lighting subjects, with some type of a speed light or a flash type accessory. This turkey came from Madera Canyon, lives up in Madera Canyon. I was up there with David Hale, and we were playing, bird photographer stuff with these turkeys. And, you might look at that and say, well, did you use a speed light on that too? Did you use a flash? And the answer is yes, sure did. This next one's kind of a fun one. If you're a music lover and you like to go to concerts, concerts are great places for practicing composition. You can sit there and click pictures with your smartphone or compact camera, DSLR. I don't recommend that people use any type of a flash or a speed light if they're in a concert type setting. Although I know a lot of people, when they're clicking pictures with their smartphones, you see flashes going off here and there if they're taking pictures of the group performing. I don't use any of the flash stuff with my DSLR because I don't want to blind these guys. I want to be able to see the audience and stuff. But usually they have lighting that helps you out with the lighting on this stuff. Scenics are a great way to practice composition. Leslie did this one. This is Bon Air. And, it's a very, very nicely composed image. So anytime you can get out and practice compositions, it's a really good thing. So again, I'd like to thank all of the photographers who allowed me to use images captured with different camera systems for this presentation. Here's a list of them again without the types of cameras that they used. Great bunch there, willing to help out. And I had some support from businesses with this presentation as well. The dive shop in Tucson, 72 Aquatics by Paragon helped out. Ultralight Control Systems in Oxnard, and then give a little credit to the Boys of Summer. That's an Eagles tribute band. I know one of the band members who's in that group. I used to fly fish with him when I lived in Colorado. So, those guys let me come in and take pictures during their concert. So, any questions anybody has?
Nice presentation,
yeah.
Bill. Thank you.
No questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks,
I
Phil.
think,
Go ahead.
just to comment, Phil,
What's
that
that?
is practice, practice, practice. You
Yep.
can't expect to take great pictures if you only go out once every 2 or 3, 6 months, a year and do underwater pictures. From all my seminars as a professional photographer, they say, just go out and use your camera, get to know it, shoot pictures, just shoot pictures. So
Well,
that's a good tip.
another kind of angle on that is that, if you're out shooting pictures, wanting to pack your camera, pack your camera all the time. Make that camera
Yep.
kind of an appendage of yourself so that
Yep.
especially if you're packing one of these systems like I do, like a DSLR. Most people, when I go out and do stuff, I'm always packing a camera on my shoulder, around my neck. With a phone, it's even easier because I can just stick the phone in my pocket and pull it out and, click pictures with it. You don't have to save all the pictures. The nice thing about digital is you can snap the picture and then make the picture go away after you look at it, after you've kind of evaluated it and say, hey, how good did I do with this, or did I blow it, kind of thing. And it tends to help you figure out things like lighting. First time I went to Hawaii, I did that night manta ray dive. And I did that dive and I thought I had everything all figured out. When I got back to the hotel room after doing that dive and I popped the pictures into my computer and looked at every frame was black. It was totally, totally black. I didn't have any usable pictures from that experience at all. And I was bummed. I was really, really bummed. Well, when I went back, and Colleen and I used to go to Hawaii a couple times a year before the pandemic shut down stuff. When I went back, I figured I better figure this out, how much lighting I need. So one night I went in one of our spare bedrooms where I set I set a dive light in the middle of the bed pointing up at the ceiling, and I shut the door, I shut off the lights, so I'm sitting there in the total dark with just the dive light going, and I thought, okay, how do I figure, I've got to figure out the settings for this camera so I can capture these manta rays. And I figured out what ISO I needed to shoot at. You know, I figured out the aperture that would work at different ISO settings for that total dark thing or shooting with just the dive light thing going on. And my second trip out there, when I did the manta ray dive, fabulous pictures. I mean, just pictures that just blew people away. So practice, 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 practice makes a difference. So no quick questions?
Thanks, Phil. That was great.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you, Phil.
I need to figure out the screen share thing on this computer. It's the one I
I
use for astrophotography stuff.
I really
Anyway.
I liked it that way because I was able to read along and no and be able to see what was coming or what you were talking about and being able to see it in the photo. I really really liked the way that
Well, I test ran this thing. I ran it. I hooked the computer up to a monitor last night and ran through it. And my monitor at home did not show the presenter view like you guys all got to share tonight. So I apologize for that. I'll figure out how this works better. And I think hopefully we need to do a little promo and stuff at the next club meeting there, but we probably need to promo the underwater session stuff where we'll get everybody together and
Tell us more right now.
more
What's
what?
the next one? Give us a promo about the next one.
Well, what we'll do is we'll set up some targets in the pool there at the dive shop. We'll have multiple targets available, and what we'll do is we'll set things up so that people can actually get in the pool with their camera systems. Hopefully, a lot of the people who show up for that will have lights on their systems, either video lights or some type of a strobe system, and we can work with people on how to actually use their lights effectively to light some of these targets. And I'll have targets that are sitting on a couple of tripods. I'll have probably a target or two sitting on a rock. We may even have a diver target since, you know, a lot of folks when they're out diving, they like to take pictures of other divers, and whoever we have modeling for that, we'll make sure to tell them, you know, don't be doing the funky things with your hands, you know, giving us the peace symbols and all that kind of stuff. You know, we're looking at just what kinds of lighting do you need to use to light up somebody who's probably in a black wetsuit, primarily black wetsuit, in a, you know, dark water or whatever. Anyway, so those are some of the kinds of things we'll do.
What's the date, Phil? What's the date and where?
Oh, the date I believe is the 27th. It's at the dive shop. I don't think I have one of you guys probably knows the time better than I do. Did we set a time for that? Is it like 11 o'clock or what time?
Dave,
I'd
do
have
you
to look
know?
at my phone to grab my calendar off of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Let me grab my phone.
I think the date is July 27th, 1 to 3.
Okay,
What was that?
1 to
1
3.
to
Phil.
3.
Okay. So I'll have a couple hours, and I've had several people actually offer to help with that. So if need be, you know, I can be in the water part of the time and actually on the, you know, out of the water and letting other people help folks if we have a good number show up. The other thing I'll do is I'll rig a couple of these larger camera systems that I have just in case any of you want to walk back down memory lane who've downsized and you want to shoot some pictures of some models with a larger system. Or if anybody just wants to say, hey, I've never tried one of those before, how about let me try that out? I've got a couple of systems I'll put together and bring along so that people can actually, experiment with them and stuff like that. So should be fun. Dave and I've done that before down at the dive shop and had a pretty good time with it. So.
Hi, Phil. Thank you for the presentation. Where do you have a retailer that you would recommend? I mean, there's so much online.
Well, it depends on what you're after. I was in one of the dive shops when I was prepping for this. I went down, I think it was 72 Aquatics at Paragon there. And I asked them, I said, how do you handle customers that come in wanting to look at camera systems? And Toby kind of grimaced and he said, well, if it's anything above and beyond like an Olympus TG system, we usually refer to these people to an outfit called Backscatter. One of the things I'll tell you now is if you want a list of resources, you can email me, and what I'll do is I'll put together a list of resources for some of this equipment and stuff that I was flipping through tonight. The email is Cortez Blue Photography at yahoo.com. So just drop me an email and I can email you some stuff. And I've helped quite a few people put together underwater camera systems. I helped Janet Hale with hers. Those of you who know Evie Lipsy, Evie has showed up here wanting to put together a big system. About all Evie does now is dive trips. So she's actually turning into a pretty good photographer with her equipment.
Actually, Joyce, I've been using a large rig like Phil's for quite a number of years, and I'm downsizing. And in fact, this week, and in fact today, I'm transitioning to a smaller, full frame camera, a Sony A7C II, primarily for video. So I'm transitioning not only from still to video, but I've been working with Backscatter this week.
Backscatter.
And I could give you some pointers too as far as equipment. But like Phil alluded to, it depends on what you want. It depends on a number of things, cost,
Yeah.
but also what you think you want to get into. If you want to do stills or macro or video. Yeah. Or I'm just tired of lugging this heavy equipment around the world all the time. So that's why I'm doing it.
Well, something I would add to that too is that I refer people a lot to sources where they can shop for used equipment.
Yeah.
That's not a cam housing that I use with my D850 system was used when I bought it. I got a heck of a deal on it. That camera housing would cost close to $4,000 now if I bought it by itself. And I bought it used from a guy who was upgrading his system. He was going to go to a mirrorless system and wanted to get out of the 850 and move on to one of Nikon's mirrorless cameras. I think a Z8 or something like that. And I'm sure his wife gave him an ultimatum and said, before you can buy the new one, you got to get rid of the old one. And so he made me a heck of a deal on the new one or on the old one. I bought that housing and it came with a 45-degree finder. I bought that thing for $1,200 and that's beautiful.
A great deal.
It works really, really, really well.
Yeah.
So
So
made his wife happy, I'm sure.
Yeah. I've done the big rigs and I've done the mirrorless, the 4/3, and found that it was too much. And I've gone to the Olympus 6. I like it because it's sturdy and tough. And even if water gets into it, it still is waterproof.
It works.
And you can rinse it off and go on again. And you don't need to carry all that stuff with you. I mean, you got to have the lights. You really do. What are you going to do with it is the end thing. If you're just going to, print some 8x10s, 11x14s, the Olympus TG series seems to be enough. And it's cost effective. I mean, it's not outrageously expensive.
Okay.
If you
So,
don't
Yeah.
have a camera yet, maybe if you come to the pool session, you'll see a number of cameras
Yeah.
to get an idea of, what you'd be
Yeah.
getting into.
Yeah, I've just done like the Sea Life, GoPro. I have
Mhm.
another Insta 360. So small, compact, portable.
Yeah.
Joyce,
Um,
you,
yeah.
you saw mine on the boat. I won't mention that picture of the bucket on the boat was mine. My camera was in there, and it usually doesn't happen. I usually rinse it and then pull it out and try to put it under the seat where I have control over it. So,
Okay.
I'm surprised
So-
their camera stayed in that bucket as rough as the water was there. Most of the
well, and
water
there was no
sloshed,
water in the
most
bucket.
of the water sloshed out of that
Yeah.
bucket, due to the high seas we were in and stuff. But yeah, it
Mhm.
really depends on what you want to do. I mean, Janet Hale, and if you've been in the club, you've seen a presentation by her on the macro stuff that she does. Janet was using an Olympus TG series camera system, and she was getting a little frustrated because she really wanted to get super into macro and really produce what she didn't feel that the Olympus was giving her the quality images that she wanted to produce. And so she asked one of the guys that she was working with over in Indonesia, she said, "What do you recommend?" And that guy said, "Well, I'd recommend that you move to a larger system like a DSLR, and you'll have more control over everything." And for Janet, moving to that larger system worked well for her. Although I'll tell you right off the bat, she was scared to death of it.
Yeah.
She was absolutely petrified of that system when she first
And
put
what
it
is she
together.
doing with her photographs, Phil? What is
I'm
she
not
doing
sure.
with them?
I don't know for
Okay.
sure. She produces calendars. I know she's over there, or at least she was over there last week. She was
Yeah.
emailing me a lot of times, and some of these people I work with, when they go on dive trips, I know they're out there because I'll get emails or
Mhm.
text messages where they'll send me an image here or there and say, "Hey, how can I improve this?" or "What can I do different to make it better?" And I don't mind helping out. I don't charge for any of this stuff, guys. I just help people because I want to. It's me coming full circle. I had some guys help me out when I started in photography, and I'm not, other than selling books and photos, most of the time to people I don't know. I'm really not interested in trying to make money off of helping people get started with doing something that I love. So, for what it's worth, that's kind of where I am. But be happy to let you, if you want to show up for the pool session, Joyce, I'll be happy to let you, you can try one of those big systems that I'll bring with me just for the heck of it. And we'll get you in the water with it. Once you get in the water with it, it's no big deal. It's, the systems are really pretty easy to manage underwater. It's the getting it to wherever you're diving that's more of a problem. And
Yeah.
honestly, lugging it around, from your hotel down to a dive boat is kind of a pain in the butt too. That big system I use weighs 25 pounds when I pack it around. In the water, it's pretty much,
Neutral.
it has enough floats on it that I don't have, it's not like tying myself to a big rock and jumping in the water with it. So anyway, but it's something, there's a lot of things to think about when you're looking at investing in a camera system. And the compact systems are not nearly as expensive as a DSLR. iPhone systems are relatively cheap compared to a lot of the systems I've seen people use. So, some pretty good stuff, pretty good ideas there you can kind of play with. And again, if you need help, you got people in the club who will help you out. I don't mind helping. You've got, Jack's offered to help. He's got some expertise with this stuff too. Leslie's been doing it for a long, long time. Dave's been doing it for quite a while too. And there's no shortage of underwater photographers who are using different types of equipment, underwater. So lots of help out there if you're
Thank
interested
you.
in getting started.
Cool. I just want some clearer images. to see.
Oh, you want it in focus.
We can help you with that. That's not that hard.
Okay. Shall we wrap this meeting up? It's been great.
Ready to wrap.
Can I get
Thanks,
And
Phil.
you get
Joyce,
what?
did you,
Very much.
Joyce, did you shut your kid up back there?
He wants one of the iPhone systems.
Okay, we'll
Well,
work on
those
that.
are readily available at the dive shops in Tucson. There's no shortage of those. Those guys can help you out with that, no problem. You don't have to go through an underwater Photoshop to be able to buy an iPhone type system or a Sea Life system. A lot of those guys can help you out. Although you do want to go, you want to go to a shop where the people are at least a little bit familiar with underwater photography. I used to dive with a gal whose fiance